exclusively on ESPN Plus. UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and our match report on Forest's progress through to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup after beating Ipswich Town 5-4 on penalties at the City Ground after a 1-1 draw after extra time. Phew, there's a lot to pack in there, isn't there? So I'm joined by Steven Toplis for this match report, which we are recording the day after the event. And Steven, first of all, how was it for you?
It was a roller coaster again. It seems to be the way of our cup exploits this season, that we're liking to go to penalties and make life more difficult for ourselves. Thankfully, the game didn't finish quite as late as the previous round at Exeter. But we got the same result, which was through on penalties, and it's always nice when you win on penalties.
Yeah, the old classic, it's a nice way to win and a horrible way to lose. And I think certainly we're making heavy weather of our progress in the Cup so far. And as our very own Tom Newton opined, has there ever been a season where Forest have had 3 penalty shootouts in one season so far? There's still room for more.
It's a good question, actually, and not one that I would know the answer to. I'm struggling to think if we even had 2 in one season, penalty shootouts. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it could be a record that, the way we're going, I think we're going to add to it.
Well, yeah, who knows? Let's go to the teams. Nuno did far more of a mix of the first team and the players who are kind of on the fringes slightly. So we had Matt Sells in goal. We had Ola Aina and Alex Moreno in the fullback positions, with Murillo partnered by Morato on this occasion. Skipper Ryan Yates was back in midfield alongside Ibrahim Sangare and Danilo. And we had Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Elanga on the wings, with Taiwo Awoniyi up front. Now, Stephen, there's a lot of talk about how many changes was Nuno going to make. Was he going to pick a second-string team? Was he going to take the Cup a bit more seriously? Or has that been influenced by the tie at Exeter where, well, to be honest, it didn't look like a very coherent performance? What do you make of that starting lineup in yesterday's match?
I think it was Nuno taking the competition seriously, because once the draw had been made prior to this game, it did feel like the competition had opened up somewhat for Forest, and there could be an opportunity to go really deep into the competition, the FA Cup this season. But yeah, the Exeter game as well will have played a part, I'm sure, because when we did really rotate the team heavily that night, nobody covered themselves in all that much glory. The performance wasn't brilliant, and perhaps that was in Nuno's thinking as well. And also the fact that with respect to Exeter, we are playing a Premiership team here in Ipswich. I know they've got their struggles in the league, but they're still a Premiership side, and despite their changes, I think they were always going to be a tougher test to Forest, as it proved. So I was actually quite pleased to see a stronger lineup last night. I think I think any cup run is good for your league form. I think it's a good way of keeping a winning mentality going in the squad, and particularly if your league form stutters a bit, the cups can provide a good escape from that. And I think, given our form in recent weeks, this was a good example of it.
Yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned there as well, Ipswich did make some changes to their team, but yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, uh, well, how shall I put this? It wasn't a big surprise that it was a match low on quality chances, but it was also perhaps Forest were the team who are most likely to. So let's have a chat about the match itself. Now, listener, I'm going to let you into a secret about the way we put this podcast together. Stephen and I did have a chat before we started recording, saying, "Are we going to talk about the first half?" Nah, probably not. There's nothing of massive consequence happened in that first half. I'm struggling to think of a chance, to be honest. I think the main thing that I would ask, and this is not just relating to the first half, but to the approach to the match as a whole, is in terms of a slight tweak to the formation. So we assumed when the team was read out that Danilo would be playing as a 10 with Yates and Sangare holding. And actually, it was more or less the opposite of that. Most of the time, it seems to be that Danilo was playing as a 6 and Sangare and Yates playing as 8s with the license to get forward a bit more. Do you think that's just a bit of experimentation?
It felt like it a little bit. And again, I think the midfield didn't really work last night. It struggled for fluency, and I think Danilo and Sangare in particular still look way off their peak sharpness, still coming back from injuries. So the interesting thing with the formation, particularly in the first half for me, was the overloading on the right hand side of midfield. So you had Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi pretty much doubling up as wingers down that right hand side and linking up a lot. And I do wonder if that was due to Morgan Gibbs White not starting the game, whether that opened up the opportunity really for Elanga to
So
come
the
across
lack
more.
of a natural 10 meant that the
Yeah,
wing get past. And interestingly, in his post-match interview, Nuno was asked by Colin Fray, he's like, is this something that you've asked the players to do? And Nuno laughed it off and said, oh, no, the players make the decisions on that. The players make the decisions. But there's clearly, I've not seen the video of it. I'm suspecting he was smiling as he said that.
yeah, I think there was something going on there, something deliberate that we were trying. And to be fair, out of the two teams in that first half, Forest were the ones who looked the most likely to score, and we were the more attacking side, and that double up was causing Ipswich problems down their left hand side. So yeah, it was an interesting approach. I doubt we'll see it again this season. I'd be very surprised unless it's some very short spells that we see that again. But interesting nevertheless.
Yeah, it doesn't really work if you're playing either a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-4-3 for obvious reasons in the latter case and for the reasons you've mentioned in the former. However, what it did mean is that Forest were in danger of getting overloaded themselves. So I'm wondering if the part of that experimentation was also to try and nullify Sam Morsey and Massimo Luongo, who were playing in the defensive midfield positions for Ipswich. But I found that all that's happening is that Danilo was getting a little bit isolated and overloaded with the three of Ben Johnson, Jack Taylor, and Nathan Broadhead kind of pressing up against our back four. And yeah, it didn't feel particularly comfortable, did it? In defensive situations, anyway.
No, it didn't. No, and this is probably where you are seeing the drop off in quality in the squad from the first team that's playing in the league and the substitutes. I think actually, given how far we've progressed this season, I think we've discovered that our reserves are perhaps not quite to the standard that we might need in order to go deeper in cup competitions or to stay in the top four, top five of the Premier League. So it's yeah, I mean that was interesting. I think again probably a little bit of a disjointed performance from the defence. I think Alex Moreno, he seems to have dropped off in recent months, partly because he hasn't been able to get much game time. That's not his fault. Nico Williams has been excellent playing at left back. And then Morato, he's obviously in and out. He doesn't generally start for Forest. If he's playing, it's more to come off the bench and make up a central three with Murillo and Milenkovic to see a game out. So perhaps that rustiness and that vulnerability can be explained there.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
I thought Aina was decent. Obviously, Matt Sells was Matt Sells. So yeah, they were positives.
Yeah, and we'll come back to some of that a little bit later on, but let's move into that second half then, as promised. And really, I thought Forest actually started quite brightly in that second half and looked the team more likely, but it was Ipswich who broke the deadlock. And there were three things that happened within a very short space of time. The first one was that Sam Morsey. So Ipswich broke and then tried to press against us. The ball came to Morsey on the edge of the box, and he had a shot, which was one of those where the keeper cannot take a chance. So he tipped it over, and from the resulting corner, what I was annoyed about is that Morsey had Forrest had dropped off, giving Morsey the chance to have the shot. And then the defence, despite there being loads of defenders on the goal line, George Hirst was pretty free to get the header in. And I was a little bit disappointed with that. I just felt that Forrest had switched off a little bit in those positions. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a funny one because when I first saw the goal, I thought that it had just dropped into the net by fluke. I was wondering how Hurst had managed to get it past so many defenders. But then when you saw the replays, it was obvious that Forrest's defending was not really there, and he was given space at the back post to take his time and put his header on target. I did think Aina might have been obstructed as the ball was coming in. I can't remember if it was Delap or one of the Ipswich players had a grab of his shirt, so he couldn't really move out and try and get to Hurst even if he wanted to. But that doesn't excuse the rest of Forest's defending because, yeah, you can't be leaving a player virtually 6 yards out unguarded to head home. That's it. That's basic stuff, really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I say it felt careless. It felt careless. And then the other moment, there was a careless moment, came shortly afterwards when Morato got a booking. And this is a bit of a funny one, really. And the reason I bring it up isn't because it was a booking or isn't because it's Morato, but because the way in which it came about. It's one of those where he went in, won the ball cleanly, but was deemed to have taken the player out with his follow through. And the reason I say it's careless is could Morato have done it differently? Maybe. Was the referee being niggly? And I felt that the referee was a little bit fussy throughout. So I think the referee went for the easy option in booking the defender. And at a time when Ipswich just had that little bit of momentum, I felt that he was just going for the easy option.
Yeah, I did as well. I think it was an honest tackle. I don't think there was all that wrong with it, and I think and with challenges like that, as long as he wasn't reckless or out of control, which he wasn't, a follow through is going to happen sometimes when a tackle's going in. So I think in a situation like that, you kind of hope the referee can read the situation for what it is, and if the tackle's been made in a clean and fair fashion, then that should be enough. Really, there should be no need for a yellow card. And yeah, it was a difficult. Well, it made life more difficult for Morato because then he's having to play the rest of the game, making sure that he doesn't pick up another yellow and end up getting sent off. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and bearing in mind what we saw from Massimo Luongo in the first half, where he got booked pretty early on and didn't change the way he played at all. So he basically did the same things he got booked for again and didn't even get spoken to. So as ever, and I know this is a well-worn conversation. I don't want to make this match report about the referee because I don't think the referee affected the result. But as ever, you just want to see the same decisions made twice. Let's move on then. And Anthony Langer, he's had a bit of an up and down time recently, and he actually in a very similar way to Ola Aina. I think he's looked a bit leggy recently. Maybe he looked as if he's a bit tired, but he did get the assist for Ryan Yates's goal in this match. It was a corner which came back out to him, was played back out to him, and then he took the corner with his right foot. The ball came onto his left. He popped it back in, and Yates got in sort of towards the near post with a close range header, far end of the ground to me. So as far as I was concerned, I just saw a bunch of players going in, saw the ball come through, and then Yates being the one who looked like he'd scored. But also interesting to note, no real celebration from anyone. There's just a kind of general determination, its air of determination. Come on, lads, we got this. We're going to do this. So yeah, tell me about what you've seen, maybe from the replays that I wouldn't have seen from being there at the far end of the ground.
I mean, it was just a very well-worked goal. I think it was good to see Alanga putting the ball back in with his left foot. Obviously, we see him, he's most strongest on his right, but he had the opportunity to whip it in left-footed, and he did. He timed it well. Yates timed his run well to make sure he wasn't offside, and he took his header really clinically. I know a lot has been said in the past about Ryan Yates. He gets himself into these really good positions, particularly aerial positions in the box, but sometimes his direction with his headers isn't always there. But when he connects and he gets it right, he can get goals, and he can be a real asset in those situations.
I think we've had this conversation before, haven't we? I think the days of 50p header have been and gone. And he proved that again, not long afterwards, just a few minutes later, but this time it was disallowed for offside. Again, I'm not in a position to comment, but it didn't seem like there was a huge amount of argument. The good lady wifer indoors has told me that, they drew the lines on the telly and that it was fairly close. But again, there didn't seem to be a huge amount of argument.
Yeah, no arguments at all. Ipswich defended this situation far better than Yates's goal, where Ben Johnson was playing him onside by a couple of yards. So they'd sorted themselves out for this, and yeah, he'd just gone offside, so no complaints there.
Yeah, and one thing that I will comment about, just as we, on the topic of the skipper, firstly, I was delighted to see him back in the team. I do think that we've missed his energy, his leadership, that presence that he's got. And although he was, playing in a different role until the substitutions, I felt that, again, that presence was really important. The other thing that I will say is, because I was so much closer to the pitch than I have been recently, is that it's easy to forget just what a physical presence Ryan Yates is. Everyone's, you look on the telly and you see Milenkovic and Sells, they're obviously really, really big guys. And you see Murillo with his rectangular frame. But Yates is actually incredibly tall and he's incredibly strong. And so that lends itself to his ability to win free kicks, to be combative. But again, just that idea of having a presence in the middle of the park. And I think that's maybe what we've missed in some of those league encounters recently.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when Yates has come off the bench in those games, he's made a real impact, and he's showing time and again that he's got plenty to offer this Forest team. It seems to be that the better Forest get, Ryan Yates seems to get better as well. He's been there now from the days when we were near bottom of the Championship, and he's now in the team where we are third in the league, going for the Champions League and having another good run in the FA Cup. And he's proving himself to be an important member of the side. And yeah, you're looking at, there's probably some midfielders in there who are more technically gifted than Ryan Yates, but they're not having the same effect on games. And actually, I think Ryan Yates gets unfairly criticised for his technical ability. I think it's a lot better than people give him credit for. So, I'm pleased to see him on the score sheet and having this positive effect in games. And I'd be very surprised if he's not in the side on Saturday lunchtime for Man City.
Yes, I would be. I would hope that he would be in that team. And that seems like a good point to leave it for the first half of our report. We'll be back in just a moment with a bit more about the rest of the second half, extra time and penalties.
The 1865 Match Report.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free. I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 Match Report with me, Rich Ferraro, and with him, Steven Toplis. Now, Steven, we had talked about the equalising goal. What we hadn't mentioned was the fact that Forest had made those much-needed substitutions on the hour mark, which is when you'd usually expect Nuno to make them, and that saw Sangare and Danilo go off. I think they'd both done okay in the sense of individual performance-wise. They were okay, but I don't think that it was sustainable to keep them on. And in terms of having that midfield presence and dynamism, we needed to bring on Anderson and Gibbs-White, who, as you've mentioned earlier, there's a clear difference between those players who've been playing regularly in the first team and those who haven't. And obviously, we did revert to our more traditional 4-2-3-1, and that's why Forest were able to press a lot more effectively in attacking positions. Couple of things to note. Number one, Murillo had a bit of an up and down day in terms of, I think his defending was good. His long range passing, which is usually so effective, he was off radar in this match. But he also had another one of his shots from 20, 25 yards, which really stung the gloves of Alex Palmer in the Ipswich goal. And then also worth pointing out that our rectangular Brazilian also had a really, really powerful effort later on in the match, which was with his right foot, if I spotted it correctly.
Yeah.
And who did it hit? Well, we talked about Ryan Yates' presence in the team. Unfortunately, he got in the way of said shot.
Classic Murillo again, isn't it? When he's got these opportunities to come forward, he's not afraid to have a go. And surely one day, one of them's going to go flying in the top corner.
Oh, we just need... I mean, it would have been perfect if that one against Liverpool had gone in, wouldn't it? It really would have been like the icing on the cake for an extremely impressive season for the young man. The other shot that I want to just comment on was one by... I think it was by Anderson. It's difficult to tell from where I was. But there's one that kind of was hit very powerfully, a snapshot. And did it hit the stanchion or did it hit the frame of the goal?
Yeah, frame of the goal. And looked like it was a lot closer than what it was, but it was a good effort nevertheless from Anderson.
That's disappointing because from where we were, it was one of those where you're going, everyone just turned around and goes, well, bloody hell, what was that? Where did that come from? So yeah, and now Forest also made the other substitutions, so they brought on a couple more regulars. Nico Williams and Chris Wood came on for Alex Moreno and Taiwo Awoniyi. The thing that's remarkable about the Wood substitution is that he was all set to come on about 15 minutes earlier, but his substitution at that time was shelved because Yates scored the goal. So Forest were getting ready to bring on one of the big guns and then decided they didn't need to. You've mentioned Moreno. One thing I will just mention in his defence is that when Hudson-Odoi and Elanga were doubling up on the right wing, Moreno was basically playing as a left winger as well. So again, like shape-wise, it added a different dynamic. But yeah, I think he's confirmed what we thought even when we were linked with him, was it 2-3 years ago, which is good going forward. Defensively, is he all that? I think his pace makes up for some of his deficiencies, which is he gets caught out of position a lot and he ends up having to kind of recover to make it up. So Nico Williams, as we've commented before, his positioning is something he's obviously worked really, really hard on. So I think that's something that is to the Welshman's credit. Can you give us a word on Taiwo Awoniyi's performance in this match?
Yeah, well, he went close in the second half. He had an effort from reasonably close. He'd been set up by Anthony Elanga down the right-hand side. He pulled the ball across and it just looked like Taiwo miscued his effort and the chance went begging. He looked a little bit sharper, to be honest, and it was good to see him in those kind of scoring positions, even though it didn't come off for him. For me, it's just any game time he can get at the moment is a bonus to build him up and take some of the load off Chris Wood, because if Chris Wood is injured, I do worry that there'd be a massive drop off. I'm a big fan of Taiwo, but it's we've just become so reliant on Chris Wood's goals. I don't see where we'd replace those really.
Yeah, what I would say is I think if something happened to Woody, Forest would need to change their attacking patterns slightly to accommodate Tyro, because Chris Wood, one of the things he's so very good at, apart from being a natural finisher. So Tyro is quite good at being in the right place at the right time. Woody's a natural finisher, but also his movement is, I mean, it's just those extra years of experience, isn't he? He's very good at kind of peeling off the back of a defender and that kind of thing. And whereas Taiwo is very much more kind of at the point of your attack. And I think last night really proved that. He did stay quite rigidly in the number 9 position. He did a lot of running. As ever, there was a bloke who sat near me who was saying he's an absolute donkey, he's finished, and so on and so forth. And then just shut up whenever he did something good, like held off a defender and played it on to one of the wingers or whatever. So some people are never happy, and of course that's the natural state of football fans. To anyone who's listening to this who's new to our beautiful game, so do you think that 1-1 at 90 minutes was a fair reflection?
I actually think Forest, on the balance of play, probably could and should have won it in normal time. We had the opportunities, the shots we mentioned. Callum Hudson-Odoi also hit the bar late on in the game, and I think, based on the pressure and the chances that Forest put and created against Ipswich, I think we could have won that game in normal time, and I think that would have been deserved. But extra time it was, and we were in familiar territory again.
Yeah, and we were, and as so often with extra time, it was a bit cagey, particularly from our visitors. I'm just going to go out and say it. I think there was only one team who was actually actively looking to win it, although there were a couple of little scary moments on the break. I think I cannot for the life of me remember if this is in normal time or extra time, but there's a moment where substitute Jack Clark had managed to kind of wriggle his way through and then shot wide. There was a moment where Delap kind of again miscued, and as ever, the Forest fans enjoyed singing to their Ipswich counterparts, "That's why you're going down." There was obviously some truth in that, but again, Forest, were they a little bit kind of complacent at the back? Maybe not. There are a lot of tired legs out there, let's just say that. Were there any particular moments to note from extra time that you would like to bring up beyond that?
Well, just to mention Delap, when he carried the ball upfield, I think he had Clark in support of him, and he just chased this ball forward, and I thought he's still going here, he's still going, he's going to get a shot away, and in the end the danger passed for Forest. But actually, just talking about Liam Delap, I would love to see Forest sign him in the summer. If he does move on from Ipswich, I think he would work well alongside Chris Wood as both of them rotating as different options, one in reserve, one the starter. I think they'd both complement each other really well, and he'd fit the kind of player that Forest would be looking to pick up, those young domestic players with plenty of room for growth. A few moments also for Forest in extra time. Hudson-Odoi again tried with another curling shot. Chris Wood tried to get in and get his head on that effort as well as it flew wide, but that was in vain, and the ball went wide. Forest subs, I think, made a big difference, and you saw that in extra time when you had, I think, out of the two teams, Forest was still the most threatening. There was a moment when Nico Williams got forward, putting a really good cross from the left-hand side, but Wood wasn't there in time, and the chance went. But then Ipswich did have that penalty shout as well for Liam Delap, which could have been a bit hairy. I think he was up against Morato. He knocked it past him, and just as he entered the penalty area, fell over, but the referee played on. Actually turned out to be the right decision, I think, looking at the replays, but a little danger there of Delap's threat again.
as ever, the angle you see things from actually makes a big difference. And the angle I was at, you could very clearly see that, okay, I'm looking at this through red tinted glasses, but immediately I was like, that's not a foul. And actually, at the very worst, he fell over. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way I'd characterize that. And I will just also add in there, I suspect that there will be many clubs in for Delap signature in the summer, and Ipswich can probably name their price, to be perfectly honest. I wonder if Man City have got a buyback clause on that, because if they haven't, they're going to regret it. So penalties, it was against Exeter, as we discussed in our match report with George. That's where Forest Premier League class really, really showed. Every single penalty was taken with an absolute expert touch. And I'm going to just throw to the end and just say the first 9 penalties in this all Premier League tie were all absolutely superb.
Yeah, they were, and it was in, and Forest kept with the same order that worked so well at Exeter. Excuse me. Certainly for the first few penalties, Chris Wood, Morgan Gibbs-White, Elliot Anderson, Nico Williams as well. He stuck his top corner really nice. All of Forest penalties were on the money, and it was really good to see that the players just had that confidence to stride forward, pick their spot, and dispatch it. And then obviously Callum Hudson-Odoi did the same for the fifth penalty to put Forest 5-4 up.
And I will just, out of the penalties there, I mean, what's good, there's that whole truism, isn't there? If it hits a side netting, then it's a very good penalty. And that's basically what most of Forest's penalties achieved. And I would also add in there that Nico Williams, for those of you who, like me, grew up watching a certain left back play for Forest in the 80s and 90s, who could take a good set piece, Nico's penalty was frankly emphatic. Also, something that's significant in the shootout was after Morgan Gibbs-White scored his penalty, which again was beautifully placed. I think a lot of keepers would feel that they'd made a decent effort trying to save it, but yeah, it was just beautifully placed. But then Gibbs-White went straight over to Matt Sells, and from where I was, it looked as though Sells was kind of in the zone, so a bit surprised to see the number 10 coming towards him, but it was that thing of geeing him up for the rest of the shootout. Do you think that was significant in any way?
Yeah, I think it just shows the team spirit in this Forest group. They seem like a really close bunch of players, and it clearly means a lot to them. A lot gets said about the FA Cup and Premier League teams not prioritising it, but you could see that the Forest players really wanted to win it, and little moments like that show not only the spirit in the squad, but actually that will to win as well, which is good to see.
And last but not least on the shootout, so even though it's at the far end of the ground from me, I knew that Jack Taylor wasn't going to score his penalty. I wasn't sure if he was going to miss or if it was going to be a save, but it was the least strong of the 10 penalties taken on the night. A keeper like Sells, he's very good at getting down quickly, but his just demeanour, he looked a bit nervous, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He did. He didn't have the same confidence that his teammates had shown the previous 4 takers. And yeah, it did feel like an opportunity, and obviously Sells went the right way. It wasn't a brilliant penalty. Tough on the lad. He missed a crucial penalty that Ipswich out of the League Cup earlier in the season as well. So that's rough on him, missing 2 like that. But from Forest's point of view, it was nice to see Sells make that save, that critical save at the end, and the scene were just brilliant. So good to see how much it meant to everybody. Obviously, it's always nice winning a penalty shootout, but yeah, the scenes and the enjoyment the players had at the end, it was really great to see.
Yeah, so Matt Sells running halfway up the pitch. You're never quite sure how athletic goalkeepers are. I think those of us of a certain age remember Mark Crosley at Tottenham that time. Good run, terrible dive. Sells, the other teammates had to catch up with him. And then, of course, Nuno running halfway across the pitch, giving Ola Aina a piggyback, which I didn't see at the time, but a lot of people were laughing and pointing around me. And then by the time I looked up, he was over and done with. But once again, the good lady wife indoors was quickly on the text saying, he just gave Aina a piggyback. So, yeah, good scenes. Again, a good sign of the spirit and togetherness. It's not just about getting the win, it's about the fact they did it together.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the most animated I've seen Nuno since he joined Forest. It cut to a shot of Nuno cheering and sort of running onto the pitch, and then next minute he catches up to Ola Aina and it's piggybacks, and it was amazing, really. Really good to see as well, and just shows again that spirit in the squad, and clearly Nuno players and the players like playing for him as well. So that was great.
And you could argue that there's been a little, a lot of Forest fans will argue there's been a little bit of a drop off in terms of performance levels, maybe down to fatigue, maybe down to the fact that we were overperforming for a good chunk of the season. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer that a good team is greater than the sum of its parts. And so that spirit is absolutely essential. Just to cut to what Nuno said after the match, once again, he pointed out it's not a lottery. In every FA Cup draw, we have to practice penalties. We kept the same order as we did against Exeter. They did really well, and they were good penalties. Mats did a good job as well. And also, he did say, I try not to watch the actual penalties and I just wait for the noise, which, it sounds about right. I can understand that. And then on the other hand as well, he did also say that they're willing to give the FA Cup a real go. So we have to focus on the Premier League, but the FA Cup is always going to be on our mind. It's a tricky one, isn't it? He's got a balancing act there. But again, thinking back to his time at Wolves, he did try and get Wolves going far in the Cup as well as giving them a good go in the league. And again, with a relatively small squad where they were performing greater than the sum of their parts. So in that case, past performance is a good indicator of future potential. Yes, Stephen?
Yeah, definitely. And with these kind of cup runs, I think they, like I said earlier, I think they just provide a real positive boost that you can then take back into your league form, because Forest's form of late hasn't been too great. Obviously, we've had a few defeats, and teams have caught up to us a little bit in the Premier League. But, you get through to the quarter-final of the FA Cup as it is now, you've always got a chance. And you look at the teams left in there, Forest can more than beat any of those sides. And obviously, we look at what we did to Brighton a few weeks ago, and it's going to be a completely different story at their ground. But there's no reason why Forest can't go to Brighton and think it's a great opportunity.
I'm sure that George and Baz will be talking about this a bit more in our Friday 5 show, which will come to you at the end of this week. Obviously, we'll also have our match reporters at the Manchester City match, and we will bring you that report at the weekend. In the meantime, I want to say thank you very much to you, Stephen. Thank you very much, listener, for joining us. It's now time for a well-earned rest for the players, but also for the fans. And I want to say, come on, you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.